Hi. Now that you have product adoption and retention going, the next important aspect in your release planning is how to measure the adoption and the retention metrics that you had initially planned for. The more you can incorporate data-driven decision making uh, in your day-to-day life, the easier or the more uh, relevant your decisions might turn out to be. There's a school of thought which believes data-driven decisions uh, should be the sole criteria of making decisions, and there's a school of thought which believes that no, there's a product sixth sense in product that is also important. I believe there has to be a balance. You will not always have enough data to take decisions, and you should not also completely rely on your gut or your product instincts to take decisions. So you need to have just enough data to make relevant decisions. How much is enough? That depends on the product, and I think I've covered that in a separate unit earlier. So defining the current metrics and defining the current KPIs for that particular metric is a massive challenge in the initial phases because you do not have anything else, and that is why trying to proxy it from other users, from other products, from good expectation, from good uh, analog products is a good practice that you should follow. The sooner you can establish your product metrics that you would like to follow, the better it will be for you, because you will be able to constantly iterate and improve the product metrics, and it takes some time and some amount of iteration to actually get it right, even by the senior and the most experienced product managers. Okay, so defining the success metrics is very critical, and also defining the fail metrics is also critical. That at what point of time would you say that okay, the product has failed, or the feature has failed, or the experiment has failed, right? How would you define a success metric? Well, you should start with the business goal. What is the business goal? What are we trying to achieve with this particular feature? And that can be quantified in just one term typically. It could be for example, it could be awareness, which is basically how many users have we signed up because of this new feature. What was the bump in the number of users that signed up after the launch? So you start with the business goals. Look at what is the business goal aiming to achieve. Is it revenue? Is it cost? Is it acquisition cost? Is it retention cost? Number of users? um, uh, what have you? Then look at your competition, and then move to customer specific metrics like customer lifetime value, product usage. When you do these exercise of looking at your own personal business goals, looking at the competition, and then looking at customer specific metrics, you will be able to figure out, or you'll be able to pinpoint the right success metrics that should go into each bucket. Typically, it's advocated that you should look at only one metric as your single core metric that you're trying to optimize against, and all the other metrics are in a way supporting that single metric that you're tracking. Uh, in my opinion, depending on how large your product is, you should not track more than uh, 10 metrics at the max. Ideally, 1 to 3 metrics is sufficient. But to get to this top three or top metric, you might have to track a lot of metrics, and then you'll be able to circle down to exactly the right metric, or exactly the right uh, three or 1 to 3 metrics that you should be tracking. So some of the business oriented metrics are, for example, CAC, customer acquisition cost, the lifetime value of the customer, the monthly recurring revenue, the annual recurring revenue. So typically MRR and the ARR, which is monthly recurring revenue and annual recurring revenue, are relevant for a SaaS company. That's a term that is used for SaaS companies most often. Average revenue per user, which is ARPU, which is very commonly, initially it used to be commonly used for gaming startups, but now it's used by almost everybody. Conversion rate. Now conversion rate is basic conversion from point A to point B. Now this could be, for example, what is the conversion rate of your entire site, which basically means how many people are landing and how many people are converting in a certain time frame. Or it could be simply what is the conversion rate of your search page or your search results, or what is the conversion rate of your product page, right? So conversion rates are relevant or contextual to the conversion that we're talking about. Similarly, customer specific metrics like product adoption, sign in frequency, visit frequency, referrals, and what have you. Then the feature usage, which is, let's say you have launched a new feature, how many people are actually using it. uh, Now there could be feature discovery problem, that you, while the feature has been launched, but it is 2 clicks deep or 3 clicks deep, so people don't even know that there's a new feature. So you'll have to come up with ways to advertise or market your feature within the product also. And then you will create metrics for your feature usage also, that after the launch, how many people actually are using your product, using your feature, within a certain time frame. Then the retention rate, the churn rate basically means um, the churn of your users, how many people are actually leaving your product in a certain time frame. And then finally, the quality of your product, which basically is indicated by the number of defects per month that have been pointed out by customers, for example, or that has been identified by your team, the NPS score, the Net Promoter Score, the customer service complaints, and so on. In the speaker notes, there is a study material which talks about all of these metrics in much more detail. And honestly, there's so many metrics that we can't cover all of them in any subject, in any tutorial, to be very honest. Um and the document that we have added would give you a decent idea about all of these metrics. So what are the product launch specific metrics? Um well, product launches are the end goal of a go to market plan. So go to market plans typically focus on content views, the press release, the new customer or customer upgrade, how many of that happened, what is the product adoption, what is the feature adoption. So for product releases specifically, metrics can be defined around these major activities. That is, how many pages were viewed, how many blog views happened, what how many views of press releases happened, customers, or did we get new customers, or did we see customer upgrades if it's a paid, if it's a paid product. If it's a just a content site, then typically you would have made a new product for certain activity that you wanted to, for example, bring out some of the more used product, most used categories from within the product to the front of the product, that is a home page of the product. And suddenly actually the usage has dropped, maybe because because the redesign has added more complexity, right? And when you're designing this metrics, or when you're defining this metrics, it's also important to define a timeline for that, that the improvement or the change should be seen in a certain period of time, in a day, in a 2 days, in a month, or whatever that is. If you don't do that, then it's very easy to lose focus on the metrics. Heart framework is something that we have discussed already, so I'm not going to go deeper into it. But essentially, uh, some of the metrics that relate to the attitude of the user can be connected with the happiness that the user is experiencing because of the product. So level of satisfaction or likelihood to refer are some of the examples, or some of the metrics that you can use to identify the happiness quotient of your product. Similarly, to measure engagement of your product, you can look at frequency of visit. You can look at how far in the website or app did the user go, that is the page depth or the number of clicks that had happened. The intensity of interaction, how many times is he using the product. uh, then to measure the adoption, you can look at the number of loyal and unique customers, which basically means, depending on, let's say if you're an e-commerce company, then how many times is the user coming back again and again. um, which also indicates engagement, but adoption is more to do with what kind of categories or what kind of products are is the user is the user using. um, did he start from the most obvious, like for Amazon, he started using Amazon from the books, started buying books, and has went on to start buying really expensive products, which basically means he's very deeply engaged, and that's why he's completely adopted the product and he's using it for everything. Retention metrics measure the number of users who have continued using your product over a certain period of time, right? So retention metrics would be again contextual in nature. You would use, some of the terms would be retention after a month. So you will do cohort analysis, and you look at that all the users who joined us in January, how many of them are now active in February, and how many of them are active in March. This used to be a very complex problem to do cohort analysis early on, but Google Analytics now includes cohort analysis in the homepage dashboard itself, the default dashboard itself. Plus, Amplitude Analytics also includes cohort analysis as one of their core features. Right. Finally, task success directly connects with behavioral metrics like the efficiency. How fast and how easy was it for the user to do the task that he came here for? Right. What is the error rate for the task that the user came here for? There's another framework called GSM, which is goals, signal, and metrics that you can use to create measurable metrics. This has been covered earlier as well, so I'll not go too deep. Goals basically are product level goals or feature level goals, and they're typically around the UX, the entire user experience. Signals are any kind of indicators um, that can point to the success or failure of the goals. They may also be correlation between certain assumptions and failure. So for instance, if the kind of users, if the demographic of users that we are getting turns out to be late 20s, then we have failed because we are looking at early 20s or late teenagers, right? So some assumptions has failed, and that will have severe ramifications on the product. And finally, the metrics that define the signals, right? So metrics that are sustainable, that can be maintained and tracked over time, um, and can signify or can indicate the I would say um, the impact of the signal, that how severe is the signal, is it too loud or is it too feeble. And if you place them on a x and y axis, the HART and GSM, um, you can actually create a decent metric framework which then you can use in your release planning. Typically you would do this once, and then perhaps you will update it after 3 months, after a quarter, after 2 quarters or something. So you'll not update this very frequently for every single feature that you're launching. This is a good example of using HART and GSM for a invoice product. And these are some of the examples of how a certain fully formed uh, HART against GSM framework will look like. So to conclude, metrics and measurement is the life and death of a product manager. It's the bread and butter with which you live. So the more you practice it, the better it is. Get comfortable with the metrics, the common metrics across different domains. Figure out ways to identify those metrics and figure out ways to measure those metrics using the analytical and analytics suite that you use, whether it is Google Analytics or is Amplitude or is Segment or is something else, whatever that be. Get comfortable with it because you should be spending a lot of time understanding those numbers. Uh, it's very easy to get lost in the correlation and the number of data points that you have. And whenever you feel lost, try to take a step back and look at the business goals that you started with, which perhaps was like 3 months back when you had the last discussion about the entire business goals, and then you got busy with the execution. So reflect back, look back into your notes, into your minutes of the meeting, and reflect back on why did we start building this, and try to figure out whether the metrics that I'm talking about right now, do they directly impact or directly relate to the business goal that we thought of, or is it not? And that is going to help you in defining the right metrics. There's no silver bullet to it, and it's a lot of practice. So that's it for now. Thank you.